Although I believe comprehensible input is the best way to acquire a language, there is one thing that's more important for students to best reach their potential: a sense of community. The old saying goes, students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Never is this more true than in a world language classroom. Why? Communication is inherently filled with opinions and feelings, emotions, right? That leaves our students open to feeling vulnerable when they communicate. When so much of what we do is based on communication, we have to make them feel safe and comfortable in our classrooms. Otherwise, they will never be willing to communicate in any language, let alone the target one. This video is going to be focused on giving you a great introduction to building community. In future videos, I'm going to break down some of the smaller pieces into much greater detail. For now, this is going to show you kind of the chain of building community first. Now, the first link in building community first is lowering the affective filter. There are several things that lowering the affective filter does. Number one, it provides a sense of consistency for our students, and it helps to create a non-judgmental environment. Also, there's increased confidence. Students feel more comfortable taking risks and making mistakes. And that is so important in our educational system nowadays. Students often don't feel comfortable making mistakes. They've kind of had it ingrained in them since elementary school that, oh, I'm not going to answer unless I for sure know the answer because people are going to make fun of me. Or even if I do know the answer, I'm not going to throw it out there. It's not worth the risk. Also, part of that affective filter creates a sense of safety. Our students will feel safe in the classroom if that affective filter is lowered. Now, I don't know about you. I've been teaching for 26 years now, and throughout the years, I've seen that our students' sense of safety degrade. It used to be students came from a home environment where they felt safe, loved, cared for, secure. And I'm seeing more and more students that don't come from that kind of background anymore. And so because of this, it has unfortunately fallen on to us to make sure that they have at least this one space where they do feel safe and secure. Whether that was your original reason to get into teaching or not, it's kind of our job to create that sense of safety, even if it's just for 45, 50, 90 minutes a day. Now, lowering the affective filter does something new, which it creates a positive classroom learning environment. Having community creates a sense of positivity and a welcoming atmosphere for all students where they feel like it's a fun, interesting, warm place to be. That positive learning environment causes increased motivation. Students are more likely to engage and participate when they feel part of a supportive community. They are willing to try, to go for it, to make those mistakes that we talked about earlier that are so important in language learning. Enhanced motivation then leads to the next link, which is more peer support. Students can help each other with challenging concepts, and that leads to even better overall comprehension because, as you know, teamwork makes the dream work. Peer support fosters a sense of responsibility. Students are more likely to take responsibility for their own learning and help others succeed too. And all of those things are going to result kind of in a secondary thing of increased student retention. Now, I don't mean just that, oh yeah, the students in level 1, a higher percentage are moving on to level 2 than level 3 and so on. That is important too, but they're going to retain that love of learning that's going to carry them well beyond the short time we get them in our classrooms. Now, I want to share with you 7 overarching ways that I build community in my classroom. These are things that aren't specific activities, but they're more things that you have to think about that kind of underlie, that are like building blocks for everything else. Number 1 is letting your students know that way more input is going to be happening in the class than output. In fact, I usually tell my students it's going to be pretty much at the beginning at least 95% input and only 5% output. They can expect not to give me much language back at the beginning. That doesn't mean I don't want them to be able to show that they understand, But I'm taking off that pressure of them thinking, oh, I've got to learn how to speak Spanish now. I don't know any Spanish. Well, of course you don't know any Spanish. That's why you're taking the class, or Latin or German or French or whatever language it happens to be. But they kind of have this pressure to perform right away. Like if they're not a master of it, they can't succeed. And so if they can't succeed, they don't want to be there. It kind of raises that affective filter and causes them to shut down. Number 2 is classroom jobs. Classroom jobs have become an integral part of my classroom over the last decade or so that I've been using them. It helps students feel like part of a bigger whole, right? And when each student has a role, now these roles might be something that the teacher can already do, like take attendance, pass out things, set up the calendar, be in charge of the weather, or talk about what sports are going on in the classroom or the school that day. But when everybody contributes to the greater good, community comes out of that. The third overarching concept is fostering a classroom culture where everyone is respected and seen. Now that includes a lot of things. It's where individuality is celebrated, and you make sure that all of your students know that negativity towards others will not be tolerated. They have to know that they can feel safe within your classroom walls from the other students who might pick on anything: their clothing, their hair color, skin color, sexual orientation, the family they come from. It could be just about anything. But they have to know that they feel safe and that you're going to back them up when somebody else comes at them. So of course, I want my students to feel like they can be themselves. And I tell them that, right? I want you to be able to be who you are. There is a little caveat to that though. I tell them, I want you to be who you are. I want you to feel like your natural self. Unless your natural tendency is to put down others, right? Then we have something that we're going to work for. That small part of you that feels like it's important to be better than others, put down others, that I don't want in my classroom. There's no place for it. Otherwise, I completely want you to be you. Another thing to think about is room arrangement. The traditional columns and rows kind of stifles that sense of community, because now we're kind of doing it military style or factory style. We're like, here's your place. We're on a grid. Don't move from the grid, right? That's very typical in militaristic environments, and we don't want that for school. We're not sending them down the pipeline to go just into the military. That's great if they choose that, but that's not what the purpose of school is, right? We're wanting to find the best pieces of them and have them expand. You can't necessarily do that as well in an environment that's not as welcoming. I'm not saying you can't do it in rows and columns, but I have found, in my personal opinion, things like pods or the traditional horseshoe kind of shape where students can see each other's faces and interact better than the normal, like I said, rows and columns, is just another piece in making a sense of community for everyone. The fifth thing is making sure you have a set of rules or norms. Right? I mean, that's a pretty obvious thing in any classroom. I don't think there's any teacher out there that just goes in thinking, let's do something, and then it's a free-for-all, right? No. I feel like whether you decide to do a set of classroom rules that works for you or create norms for the class with the students, making sure that they have several important key factors, right? One of them is making sure that they're easily understood. There's no gray area, right? They're well thought out. They're going to be enforced. That's very important. Students know that if they don't follow the rules or norms, that there are consequences. And make sure it's done in a predictable way. They know that there's no favorites. The next thing is noise levels. Now, some excited buzz is a good thing in the classroom where the students are engaged and active and part of that learning environment. But just keep in mind, some of our neurodivergent students need that quieter atmosphere in order to be able to focus. Otherwise, there is just too much going on, too much that's going to cause them to shut down. And the last one's kind of a two-parter. Giving students opportunities to succeed and then celebrating them early and often. Our students, very often, we have a lot of students who don't get a chance to succeed everywhere. And so they come in with a defeated attitude thinking, I can't do this. I'm not able to do this. They don't have that growth mindset. They can't think about, oh, I can't do this yet. So we've got to make sure that we're providing opportunities for them to be successful from the get-go. And don't forget to celebrate those successes. Make sure that even though it may seem like, oh, they're doing what we want them to do, I mean, they're paying attention and getting the information. Duh, that's what they're supposed to be there for. Making sure we celebrate those things because they don't know. They don't know that that's something that's expected of them. And so we've got to show them like, hey, we see you. Okay, I'm going to go over 8 specific activities that you can do to help create a sense of community within your classroom. Many of these can be used from day one. Number 1 is getting to know your students. I mean, this should be a pretty obvious one, but there's a variety of ways you can do that. Some people have a student interest survey where they have questions about, some basic things. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? How many people are in your family? They can be wacky things like, if your life was made into a movie, who would you want to play you? That kind of thing. Just to get a little more of them into the class, to be able to understand them. And there's lots of things you can do with that besides just knowing about them. Using PQA is also important, which of course PQA stands for Personalized Questions and Answers. That's a very common comprehensible input technique where you ask the students using whatever vocab or grammar or things that you're focusing on in the classroom to focus that onto the students, right? Trying to get them, again, to talk about what's most important to them themselves. Number 2, one of my favorites at the beginning of the first level of a language is TPR, Total Physical Response. Now, like a friend of mine, John Cowart, sometimes says, TPR has kind of fallen by the wayside and is often overlooked as a useful technique to provide comprehensible input. And I 100% agree with him. Besides the first couple of years of my teaching where I didn't know about CI, I've used TPR for over 20 years, and it's been one of the most successful things I do to help jumpstart their language learning, the acquisition of lots of vocabulary and phrases, and getting acclimated to the language. I'm going to definitely have a video on TPR coming up in the future. Look for it. Another big one for me lately has been calendar talk. Over the last couple of years, I've developed a lot of calendar talk activities, and calendar talk, if you haven't seen any of my presentations online or in person at conferences, is way, way more than just talking about the date, the weather, the temperature, those kind of basic things that we think about with a calendar. There's so much more you can do, whether it's talking about holidays, student birthdays, the activities that are going on within your school district on that particular day, student opinions about do they prefer spring over summer, what their favorite holiday is, talking about wild and crazy national holidays like International Redheads Day or Give a Compliment Day or Tallest Skyscraper in the World Day or whatever it happens to be. There's so much rich language that we can use with the calendar that goes well beyond just it's 45 degrees and sunny today. Card talk, which is another great activity that I've used for many years. I think I originally learned it from Tina Hargaden. It's where you take a piece of paper or cardstock and you make it into like kind of a name card where you have the students write their name nice and big, include a couple things about them. I kind of like to go with a classic, a favorite activity they like and a favorite food or drink that they like. And then we used PQA, circling kind of techniques where we talk about each of the individual students, get to know more about them. The students get to know more about each other, compare with other students, contrast with other students in a positive way. And it gets so much rich language into their heads and into their brains that is going to pay off in the long run. Another great way to get to know students is person of the day, student of the day, special person interviews, whatever you want to call them. And this gives you an opportunity to focus on one student and learn a lot more in depth quickly about them using a lot of basic language that they're going to want to know and hear and want to internalize, they want to acquire on an ongoing basis. And you do that for all the students throughout the year. Some people like to do one a day, one a week, however you want to do it. You eventually cycle through all the students and kind of interview them with some basic questions, whether they start off with, what's your name? How old are you? Where are you from? Or you get to those more interesting questions like, how many pets do you have? What do you want to be when you grow up? Who's your favorite celebrity? Anything. It could be about anything, really. The sixth thing I have on my list is call and response. You'd be surprised how something basic as saying, like in Spanish, hola, hola, Coca-Cola, creates a sense of community. When students are doing the same thing in the same place at the same time, that forms a bond. Like if it happens over and over, if you have some of these routines, like a call and a response or multiple call and responses for different things, it helps bring them together. Passwords. This is another favorite activity that many teachers use as kind of an entry ticket to their classroom, where they have to repeat or use today's password or this week's password, or however you arrange it. It's usually a phrase or word that you want to have the students focus on, that once everybody says it every day, hears that from other students, it becomes, again, more quickly acquired. And as I said, whenever you do the same thing, the same time, in the same place, it helps form that sense of community. A final thing is brain breaks. This was definitely made famous from Annabelle Williamson, La Maestra Loca, a good friend of mine, who has been called the queen of brain breaks. And if you want to know more about that, I'm going to let you go to her for that. That is not a specialty area of mine, but brain breaks help break down some of those points where students' focus and energy levels can wane, their attention span can wane. A brain break breaks the cycle of what you're doing, gives them a change in activity, and then lets them be able to get refocused again very quickly. All right, we talked about 6 benefits of creating community in the world language classroom, especially at the beginning of the year. 7 overarching ideas to kind of build the foundation of that community. And then 8 activities that you can use right away with your students to really build that sense of community. But I would like you to please comment with any aha moments or any questions that you have about the things that I talked about with community. I plan on making more of these videos, especially breaking down some of those elements that I went along. But I want to know, what do you want to know right away? What are the ones you want me to focus on next? So please comment. Tell me which ones are the ones we need to know about right now. So of course, if you want more videos like this, please like, subscribe, and share these videos, any of my links, with other teachers who you think could benefit from figuring out, learning about, diving deeper into these ideas. Another important idea of any world language classroom is reading. So if you want to find out why it should be an essential part of your classroom, please check out my other video right there. Thank you for your dedication to education and all that you do for your students. Because as you and I both know, world language teachers teach the world more than language. Hasta pronto.